各位观众大家好，欢迎来到周一详谈，我是 Katrina Chen 陈伟珍。今天大家可以看到我们来到了一个非常特别的地点，它就是位于我们温哥华市区的 YWCA Hotel。YWCA 是我们本地一个非营利组织，专门服务妇女、孩童跟很多本地家庭的一个服务组织。那我们现在是接近我们的38妇女节，特别讨论一下性别平等的这个议题重要性。所以今天很荣幸我们能够请到 YWCA 的 CEO Erin Seeley 来为我们讨论一下这个话题。Welcome, Erin.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for being on our show. So, because we're airing this close to the International Women's Day, can we talk a little bit about the importance of gender equity and why do we still have to talk about gender equity? I actually have a funny story of my son who we went to the children's hospital and there was the women's hospital there. And then he said, where's the men's hospital? And as a feminist, so I started this long lecture and conversation with my son about why it is so important that we're still fighting, for gender equity in 2025. So can you share a little bit about why is this so important?
It's important because I think even though we may be fighting for some of the same issues we fought for 20 years ago, we have made progress. We do see that women have more economic opportunity, but we know it's still unequal. So we know there's pay disparity. Even in British Columbia, we see women make 83 cents per dollar that men make in the same roles. And we know that gender equity is really important human right. It's about peace and having a just society. So that as long as there's still opportunity to create equity, to get to equality, we're going to keep fighting. I saw a statistic from 2024 that said at this rate, it will take us 131 years to create gender equity. So we need to work faster. We've got to work harder.
131 years.
That's too long.
Yeah, that's like another 2-3 generations of women and girls having to work together, and with men and our other allies as well, everybody working together to fight for gender equity. Can you provide a bit more information and what you're seeing, especially from YWCA? We'll talk about the services that YWCA do more in the next few questions, but can you talk a bit more about what you're seeing in terms of statistics and the numbers of why women are still being treated differently? You already gave some information about the gender, equity pay.
Yeah.
And I also know, for example, as a former politician myself, right, it is only until last election, the provincial election, we finally had a few more women than the men. And also, historically, we see a lot of leadership roles in management, CEOs, presidents, or different type of leadership roles that we don't still see a lot of women being able to fairly sit on the same table. Can you share a bit more about that?
Absolutely. So we still see, I think it's less than 6% of corporate board roles have women at the helm. So we have more CEOs named Michael in Canada of top private companies than we do women CEOs.
Wow.
So at an executive level, we see it. We see it also, though, in areas like in a motherhood penalty. It is a way of explaining when women choose to have children, they are set back in their career. It's harder for them to re-enter the workforce, even though we do have parental leave and opportunities to remain at home with some income. It's very hard to re-enter and to be recognized when it shows as a gap on your resume. We know pay equity is an issue. I talked about the 83 cents per dollar that women make, but we're making progress. So in BC, we have pay transparency now where you have to post the salary of a job. Okay. So at least now you can see, but there is a lot of work to do to make sure that women see themselves in roles in the same way men do. And that's across all professions, but it's especially important in visible professions, things like first responders, our doctors, our pilots, making sure that women can be examples and be role models to break through for that next generation.
So you mentioned some of the barriers such as childcare or such as I know in some communities, women are treated differently or the traditional role expectations. Can you share some of the barriers that you're seeing and the stories, maybe some individual stories that you've heard about how women are really having those challenges and not being able to still being treated equally, which we are equal as human beings, but why are we still not being treated equally as women?
Well, I talked about that motherhood penalty, and I think that is a piece where if you step away from the workforce to care for your child, but then you're looking to re-enter, childcare is that first barrier. What we see is when women can find childcare, and even finding the space is very hard, they often have to travel to get there. And so we've had participants in our programs who are there getting further education, but they've had to travel for their course to one community, say Burnaby, but they're dropping their child off in Coquitlam and they live in Surrey. And so we need to make more investment in childcare as a social program. We also see housing as a huge barrier, particularly for women who are living on their own, but even in families, the cost of housing is really prohibitive, and that's forcing people to move further away from where the job opportunities are. You know, and I would say there's still some silver linings, because one of the things out of the pandemic that really helped women be able to be in the workforce is remote work. Being able to work flexibly. That's something that's really important. Flexible work hours are a huge benefit. But even though our post-secondary education, we see more women. For example, in the trades, we see many women entering. We don't see them completing. We don't see them getting the red seals, moving into the jobs. And a lot of that is because of these barriers, the childcare, the housing, and the hours of work and the work cultures along the way.
Yeah, there's so many like little things that happen in our daily lives that we do not really think about in the connections to gender equity. For example, and you spoke about childcare, which is near and dear of my heart. Just, you know, when I was in politics, that, you know, at the government at the time, we started the 10-a-day childcare plan. And I remember one of the first things I learned at the time was that the workforce of the early childhood education workforce, 97% of the workers are women. And how can you have a workforce that's predominantly women? As you think about the reasons why, is it the pay, that because early childhood educators never really got a lot of government, when barely any government support. It's a profession that, you know, people still call them babysitters when they have to be trained professionally for years of work and studies to become early childhood educators. And at the same time, you know, other than the pay and other than kind of the societal kind of recognition or kind of stereotypes about childcare, that it's a workforce that people don't often pay attention to, but we are giving our children and our babies the most precious thing in our life to a childcare center and the women who are looking after our most precious thing in our life. And when you think about that, it is a gender equity issue. Can you speak a little bit about that? Because I also know YWCA provides childcare services. I actually visited one of your incredible centers that support women fleeing violence and being able to have quality and trauma-informed childcare. And that really was a great experience that I had learning about your services.
It's hugely important that childcare is not only quality service for the children, but also for the workers. These are the most important professions, as you mentioned, the caring professions. And we see this not only with children, but we also see it in seniors' homes, that pay is less, working conditions are hard. You know, yesterday was a snow day here. Many schools were closed. Our childcare centers were open because we knew that families relied on us to be able to go to work. And so we know how important that service is. But it's physically hard work. It's very demanding in terms of the different social, emotional needs of young children. And I think we need to honor that profession for the expertise and the value that it has in our society. And then if you imagine childcare workers at the end of the day, they probably go home and care for their own families, many of them. So we have a lot of unpaid work as well that women often carry as a disproportionate burden. And there's more in our society we can do to recognize that and to remunerate and create an environment that's safe and welcoming so we can continue to have such quality care.
Totally. I always remember this mom who used to work for the government, had pretty good income as a professional. She had 2 kids, but then went through a divorce and couldn't get child support from her ex-spouse. And she calculated the childcare cost. Well, she was having a hard time trying to find childcare, and then she calculated a cost that was actually way more than what she could afford for her housing and childcare. She ended up living on income assistance, so she could go through that really challenging period of time. And I remember she was sharing with me how challenging that time was. She said that was like the lowest time of her life. Even her self-esteem was really low. She struggle with mental health and ability to look after her children when she was actually a trained professional. And she was like, if we had affordable childcare and access to childcare, I would have been on a better journey. I could look after my kids and continue with my profession. So childcare is not just connected to gender equity, it's also an economic initiatives. And I recently read a study about how investing in childcare and the whole $10 a day plan, $1. I hope it's $1 one day. $10 childcare plan. But we do want to see childcare as a public investment. We have public education that's free. How come we don't look after children under 5 and before and after school care?
Yeah.
So I read this economic study about how investing in childcare actually has already shown significant results across Canada, especially to women's participation in labor and the workforce and being able to contribute economically. Do you see that from the women you're serving?
Absolutely. It's a big opportunity for women, for example, to be able to go from part-time to full-time work when they can find full-time childcare. It's an opportunity for them to maybe be able to retrain and be more empowered in their career to earn more. I think when you're many families have to work shift work to accommodate not having childcare. And so someone will work in the evening, someone will work on the weekends, and you don't have that ability to really further your education, to further increase your earnings. So childcare is a critical pillar. It's also really important for early learning and development and for the health of the child. And that's something when you have now full day kindergarten in the public school system, if your child hasn't had that opportunity to be in a childcare center, they're not going to thrive in kindergarten. So it works for gender equity. It also works for the children.
Totally. Well, we have to put the children first in the center of our services, and education. Childcare is such an important thing. We shouldn't break it into two. It's 0 to 18 or even older along the way. And today we are actually at your event here in the Impact series, and there were so many stories of women that were shared. And I also shared about my children's book, raising awareness about family violence through a child's view. And as soon as I shared a story, I already had 2 women coming to me talking about the impact of gender-based violence. And throughout kind of my journey as a survivor of gender-based violence and recovering from that, I realized there's such a community out there, whether it's through our lived experiences or shared advocacy, to stop this really the oldest and the longest human rights violation in human history across the world that still happens today. And I know you have some statistics about gender-based violence that's impacting our community. Can you share a bit more about that?
Absolutely. It is the oldest human rights violation, and I think globally Canada likes to think it's in a better place, but what we see from the data here in BC is that 38% of women will experience some form of intimate partner or gender-based violence. And that number's higher. It's in the 40s for Indigenous women, for 2S LGBTQIA plus women. We also know across Canada that every 2 days a woman is killed as a result of gender-based violence. And yet we don't have effective supports in victim services. We don't have effective supports believing victims to be able to access the legal system and utilize their rights. And we also really need to work with men and boys and create more prevention and opportunities to talk about what a healthy relationship looks like. And that can start really young. I'm so glad you have a children's book, because kids are smart and they see the model of the relationships around them, and they will learn respect and learn how to behave without violence if that's modeled for them. So I think this is really a community response. It's not just women who are impacted, but it is disproportionately women, and we're all part of the solution in creating healthier communities.
Yeah, when you think about the statistics that you've shared, and I also read some studies about 1 out of 3 women have touched or have experienced gender-based violence or some sort of sexual harassment or violence. This is a lot of women.
In our province.
Our province.
Yeah.
I remember one time I just visited an office and started sharing about my personal journey. And out of 5 women in that office, 3 of them were impacted by violence. 2 were reported. 1 was not reported. So the statistics actually are the ones that have been reported. There are so many women and girls, and I've shared my journey as a young child when I was first experienced the violence. When I was a very young age, I never shared that until in my late 30s. I finally decided to face my own trauma and to unpack that. So when you think about this impact on women and girls and individuals who's experienced violence, it's huge. So what can organizations like YWCA do to prevent violence?
So part of the prevention is that early education with children, those healthy relationships. YWCA has a program called Dating Safe that's in high schools in Vancouver and Surrey. It's for grades 8 to 10, and it's all about healthy relationships and gender inclusion and consent and making sure that kids, and it could start even earlier because now we know kids with social media get access to information.
Right.
So prevention is one. Victim services and supports is another. Community victim services, as much as it's important that the law enforcement and police create spaces where victims can go and report, we know community supports are critical. And just for the reason you said, sometimes we'll put on a pot of coffee at one of our housing communities, and that will be a safe way for someone to come in and start talking. At Crabtree Corner, we see this a lot, where a woman will walk through the front door thinking they might want childcare, but they'll actually end up disclosing that they've been a victim and a survivor of violence. And through community supports, whether it's mental health, whether it's a legal supports, YWCA also provides legal education and support, safe housing through transitional or long-term housing. The community organizations are so much a fabric of that prevention and also that response.
Wow. How about advocacy? I know you do a lot of advocacy work too.
We do, and we're very grateful to be working in collaboration with you, Katrina, to make sure that gender-based violence can be declared an epidemic. As much as government is an important funder of community services, we don't want to perpetuate the systems that continue to have gender-based violence be pervasive and to make it unsafe. We need safe communities. So we are advocating for a whole of government approach, more supports for survivors. We need survivors to be believed so they feel safe coming forward. We need better data. We need to have the coroner's inquests into death so we know when femicides are happening in our community, we can respond to them. We need legal supports and we need prevention. And all of the work that we're doing on advocacy around this issue is in collaboration. We're working in coalition with over 40 organizations. And so there's room for everyone to get involved and to really make this change happen.
Totally. When YWCA led the letter campaign to ask the provincial government to recognize gender-based violence as an epidemic, I remember seeing a list of maybe 30-something organizations and continue to grow and grow. And then the signatures we've collected from community members were huge. Yeah. And that was thanks to you and your team's leadership, and of course, many other nonprofit and groups that have come together to push for this. And finally, the government, for the first time, has declared gender-based violence as an epidemic. That was a huge win, and that also shows how community advocacy could work. But we actually just happened to interview Premier Eby the other day, and I share about the gender-based violence campaign as an epidemic, and I'm like, but now it's time to take action. Of course, we're going to chase after them. So what type of actions are you hoping to see government doing more, especially through collaborating with organizations like yours?
So we're really encouraged that government has sent direction to the Minister of Finance through the Parliamentary Secretary and to the Attorney General, and both to focus on gender-based violence as an epidemic. That includes social supports and community victim supports. We hope it will include data collection. We haven't seen that commitment yet, but we'd love to see the coroner and the Solicitor General be committed to collect that data. We need to see improved services for legal supports and law enforcement. You know, a lot of women, it's very risky to go forward and to say that you've experienced violence and that you're a survivor, because if you have custody of your children and you're declaring that you're in an unsafe situation, it can lead to questions about your your children's custody, the family, and it can lead you down a very difficult legal path. I think it's important that government understand the value that community supports provide as that first safe place to go when many women may never report to law enforcement.
That's right.
And that's why other investments like housing and childcare are also so critical. That's what creates a safe community. We know it takes a village to raise children, and being able to live in a secure, stable place that is at a rent you can afford and being able to have safe, quality childcare is essential.
Totally. Well, you do so much services, right, through the YWCA, the work you do, and we're actually at the YWCA hotel. I don't think many people know that there's a YWCA hotel. Can you talk a bit more about your other services that we haven't talked about, or about the hotel?
Sure. We're so proud of our hotel to be a social enterprise and really living what that means. We have 40% of our room nights dedicated to community at either free or very low rates for long-term stays. We have a lot of medical stays, a lot of refugee families, a lot of women who are fleeing intimate partner violence can come and stay here. We also have wonderful rooms for tourists. It's all renovated. We have 220 rooms. We get a lot of groups. We have rooms with multiple beds, so sports teams sometimes love it because they
so
can
close
stay.
to the
We're so
stadiums.
close. Our location's amazing. We also have a health and fitness center that serves the community down on Hornby and Dunsmuir. It's also social enterprise, lots of corporate members and individual members. Anyone can be a member. It's beautiful. 25-meter pool, sauna, and incredible gym. But the proceeds from those businesses fund our programs.
Right.
And we have programs across Metro Vancouver. We're even looking now at a broader reach across the province. If you want advanced gender equity, you have to do it in a big way. And we do a lot of employment programs. We're really focused on empowerment. We want to support women, and not only women who are having on their own, maybe as single moms, but when women are thinking about fleeing a difficult relationship, what we do is a lot of planning with them and confidence. We'll help them find employment because you need a job to support your family. We do a lot of youth programs. We have wonderful single mom supports groups, 17 of them across Metro Vancouver. And that's in addition to the housing and the childcare services. So it is really providing that community and also that confidence that we know many women need. They need someone to believe in them and to support them.
Or it takes so much courage to take that first step to break the cycle of violence and to be able to get out of unsafe situations. So thank you for the incredible work. Can you specifically talk a little bit more about the services to Chinese language communities?
Absolutely.
As our audiences are most Chinese language speakers, what are the services you provide?
So we have a very diverse group of staff. We have many Mandarin and Cantonese speakers. So rest assured that if you contact us, we can have translation of services.
Great.
We also offer specifically, we have a program called Access that's one-to-one supports for women who are leaving an intimate partner violence situation. And that we have Mandarin and Cantonese speakers who will meet directly with women, help them prepare a safety plan, help them look at employment, at childcare services, and really help them feel confident that they can move forward. I was at an event yesterday with a woman who had experienced violence and had said, she really wanted a fresh start, and having a Mandarin speaking support advisor was wonderful because sometimes you can't think in your second language very well, and being able to relax and be able to plan in your first language is something we're really proud to offer. We'd love to do more. We work in partnership as well with many wonderful community organizations, so really encourage anyone to come and ask us, and then we'll help to connect them to the supports they need.
Wow, that sounds incredible. Culturally inclusive services are so critical to be able to reach out to diverse communities. So for those audience who are wondering about YWCA's work, we know we can call you as someone who speaks Mandarin, Cantonese, or other languages, dialect, may be able to get the service. That's huge.
Absolutely.
Can you talk a little bit about your own journey? I'm always curious about how someone and women leaders like you would step into the nonprofit sector to serve communities, and what got you here?
I've always loved hard problems in my career. I think where I can make an impact to try to make the world a little bit better. I feel like we have a very short time on this earth. I was very lucky to work in Latin America in the beginning of my career, and I did a lot of work in international development, and I saw the impact of poverty that really struck me. And what I realized is there's poverty in my community, and I can also do more here. So I've always been a volunteer. Little Mountain Neighborhood House house near my home. I was a volunteer for years there. And then I worked in the public service. And so I got to work in areas of immigration, in labor market, in housing, with real estate regulation. And YWCA kind of puts all of that together because we do offer all of these services, but we need to work closely with government to make sure that the policies that they are creating are going to positively impact the lives of the people we serve. And I think I was a child of single parents, so I lived with a single dad and a single mom at different times, and I really feel passionately about the extra supports that single parents need. Single moms especially, they know what they need. They are absolutely experts in their own lives. They just need to be asked and have that path of support to get them there. So I'm really inspired by that journey every day and the work that we can do more in community.
Wow, of course. And women leaders like you create a lot of hope and good role models for other women and girls who wants to pursue different type of professions and careers. So that is really encouraging to hear. And you're so right that I always say, if our neighbors do well, we do well. We're in this community together. How poverty is bad for everybody, not just the person who's struggling with poverty. I remember when I first came to Canada, my first job was to knock on doors in lower income neighborhoods. And I was so surprised as a newcomer who came here and thought Canada was this most beautiful place in the world, that there's so much struggles families that are facing. So thank you for your incredible work in this area. And I hope all the girls and women and families and good allies who are watching this show can really hear about your experiences and the work that we are always doing here at YWCA to be able to empower more people in our community. So last quick question. How would you encourage other people to celebrate the International Women's Day?
Oh, there's a lot of ways. First of all, love the women around you, celebrate them.
Right.
I think every day should be International Women's
That's
Day.
right.
I think that, when we go back to talking about gender-based violence, though, there's a role that everyone can play. There's a role about believing survivors.
That's
we
right.
really need to believe survivors.
100%.
There's a role to talk about these issues so we can prevent them, model what a healthy relationship with women looks like. We have many things to learn from Indigenous communities as well around the matriarchal societies that they've had historically. Matriarchs are strong in full force in all of our communities. So I think being able to uplift each other, but also having men and boys be a big part of recognizing that to be a strong man means you honor and appreciate the women in your life. And that's something we can all aspire to do more of, I think. And being able to pay attention to things like the pay inequity, to advocate for change, to get involved with organizations like YWCA to try to change those systems. That's also a way to make progress.
Thank you so much for all these fabulous ideas. I always say everybody has a mom or a sister or women in their lives that celebrate gender equity and equity as a whole, so we can build a more healthier and better community down the road. So thank you so much, Erin, for joining our show today. It's such a privilege getting to know you and know the work that you do and your passion.
Thank you. Likewise. So excited to be here. Thanks, Katrina, for your leadership.
Thanks so much. 谢谢各位观众的观赏，我们希望下次再见。